Andy Loving continues to explicate the prospects of community investing and gets into details about how we can move money from Wall Street to Main Street as a very practical and effective way of economic sharing in our time.
Now, while return and profit can and should be one of the considerations in making an investment decision, if we embrace Sabbath economics, maximum profit cannot be the only factor. In other words, we have to begin to look at other things and other factors as we make decisions about what we do with money. Capital deposited in any financial institution is a measure of power. And we have to begin to ask, who are we giving that power to? The institution that gets our investments is given the right to decide who will get to use that capital and that power. Do we give our money or power to institutions that empower the poor, or further empower the rich and presently powerful? Simply put, community investing is capital from investors directed to communities that are underserved by traditional financial services. In other words, poor people. Some of the poor communities are in the inner cities of the United States and LA, and some are in rural communities overseas in Bangladesh and in Africa and around the world. Community development financial institutions help low-income people start small business or buy a home. And buying a home is the predominant way that poor communities begin to build wealth. We've done studies with it, and when you see poor communities begin to build wealth, you see home ownership. So microcredit loans, many of you have heard about that. Microcredit loans that enable poor women in developing countries to create small businesses that provide desperately needed income to feed their families or to send their children to school for the first time. These institutions could be a community development bank, they could be a community development credit union, a developer of low-income housing, an overseas microfinance institution, or a fair trade coffee company. The number of these institutions and the variety of them, we won't even have time to talk about some of the different kinds, like community development venture capital. In this very short period of time, in the last 30 years, there's just been a myriad of new institutions and new mechanisms whereby capital can get into poor communities and begin to enable those communities to begin to build the institutions and the things that they need to become vital and vibrant and independent. Now, financial returns from community investing institutions are sometimes just as good as from traditional financial institutions. And those comparable returns are called market returns. This is especially true of community investing banks and credit unions and bond funds that we talked about. Other community investing institutions, like microfinance institutions, community development loan funds, and fair trade companies may give, not always, but more often than not, give financial returns that are less than traditional investments, and those are called below market returns. In some sense, those below market returns invite us to, in essence, begin to stop worshiping at the altar of the God of maximum return, the ultimate God of our society and our economy, and begin to say that profit is one factor we have to take in consideration, but it cannot and it will not be the only factor. But also for those institutions where you take a below market return, in almost every one of those situations, the social impact of that dollar is greater. So in some sense, we begin to practice Sabbath economics because we're in essence saying, profit's one thing, it's not the only thing. Redistribution of power and wealth into poor communities and to poor people is a greater value, and that's what we're going to do.